this lesson, we're going to go into specific tips that are going to help you when you're scouting for monster trout. I would like to start with what you need to know before you even get into the water. I'm not talking about your cast or which flies to use. You can find these lessons in the beginner and intermediate sections of our members portal. In the advanced series, we're going to dive into specific scenarios to help you land monster trout. And the first thing you need to learn is the species you're hunting. Sight. So what can a trout see? How far can he see? And how does this affect how we hunt them? Well, we got to talk about is light. When light enters water, it's refracted. And to understand how a trout sees, you must first understand refraction. Now, don't get ahead of yourselves, guys. I'm not going to get too scientific about this, but just to give you a little background information on it. So refraction of light is exactly 97 degrees wide. When light hits water from side to side, it is refracted into a cone that is exactly 2.26 times the depth that the trout is in. I know, your mind is blown. But check out this diagram. As you see here, if a trout is 1 foot deep, it can only see 11 inches in diameter. So in shallow waters, fish can only see in a very small window. If a trout is 6 feet deep, it has a window of around 5 foot 4 inches. The closer the object is to the center of the cone, the more in focus it appears. Objects directly above it or towards the inside portion of the viewing portal are more in focus, while the objects towards the edge are blurrier and smaller in perspective. Because the eyes of a fish are located on each side of the head, this opens up a blind spot from the trout. This ends up being about 30 degrees directly behind them. So what can we learn from how a trout sees the world? The number one thing is outside of this cone of vision, the trout cannot see you. But when you're inside the cone, movements are magnified in speed. The best way to approach a fish is in his blind spot, and then stay away from that cone of vision. This includes your line, the rod tip, or even for you tall guys, even you. Now don't forget about your shadow. If the sun is behind you, work with it so you're not casting your shadow directly over a trout. So you might ask, what about color? Can fish actually detect color? Trout have been proven to have color vision, and unlike humans, they have 4 cone receptors versus our 3. The 4th can pick up ultraviolet rays. This is most likely used for tracking polarized light for finding spawning grounds. Pretty cool. But just as light is refracted by water, so is the clarity of the color. So the clarity of the water also helps determine the end result of what the trout is going to be seeing. Have you ever had a trout come up to your fly, and then as soon as you thought it was going to take your fly, it turns around and goes back to its holding ground? Now this was most likely because the shape matched what the trout has been feeding on, but then they didn't like the color when it approached. So try casting again, and if you get the same result, swap out your fly for the same pattern but with a slightly different color. Knowing that trout can see color also helps us decide on what color of clothing to wear when we're heading out on a fishing trip. The rule is, try to match your surroundings. If the sky is bright blue, wear lighter colors to match the sky. If you're in a canyon with dark backgrounds, pick grays and browns to match your surrounding. Sound. Sound travels up to 5 times faster and further in water than it does through the air. Have you ever heard the sound of a whale on the Nature Channel? I would try to make the noise, but it's not very good. So some of their frequencies have been tested to travel over 10,000 miles underwater. Trout don't actually have ears like humans, but they do have organs that feel sound. They have 2 lateral lines on each side of their body that allow them to detect vibrations, like our ears do for us. So I know that we've gone into depth about what a fish can see, but don't forget about what they can hear. You're more likely to spook a fish by tromping in the water before you ever get a chance to spook it with your line. Trout typically pick up any sound that is louder than the environment that they're in. In areas where water is calmer and deeper, sound travels much faster, so you're going to have to approach with a little more caution. Now shallow water, moving water, ripples, or rapids will hide most of the movement. Even rain on top of the water is going to help cancel out that unnatural sound. The sound that you create to scare a fish has to be louder than the background environment than they're actually in. So take your time and use sound to your advantage. If you're trying to imitate a hopper hitting the water, then go to town. Slap that bug off a bank of a rock and mimic that large meal that fish is going to take. Now, if you're casting a soft dry fly into a slow-moving pool, cast a spot above where you want the fly to land and let it float into your zone versus trying to have it land directly on where that fish is rising. The next section is smell. Yes, smell. Trout have an amazing sense of smell. Trout's nose is actually 2 specific holes called nares that they use to sniff out chemicals in the water. It has been tested that fish can use smell to find their way back to the place that they were born. So what does this mean for a fly fisher? Well, it means that anything we have on our hands can be transferred to our flies and can be a deterrent to that trout. Sunscreen, hand lotion, tobacco, bubble gum. Don't worry, this can be easily fixed. Before you even cast a fly, take a little bit of river gunk, rub it on the fly, rub it on your hands, and then rinse both off. This is going to eliminate any of those unnatural odors that are going to make that trout not go after your fly. In the next lesson, we're going to go into specific details of increasing your ability to match the hatch.